Hi crafters, this is Chris from needlepointers.com. Today I'd like to bring you this great loop yarn scarf craft. This is a super easy project to make and it can be made by kids or adults. This size of the scarf though is more for an adult. This scarf is made with this new loop yarn. This yarn's been on the market for a few years now, and we at needlepointers.com have a full line of tutorials on how to use this loop yarn, the different stitches that you can do with the loop yarn, and a whole bunch of projects like this one that you can do with the loop yarn, including blankets, pillows, and other things. So let's get started with this project. I made this nice fluffy scarf with this Bernat Alize Blanket-ez loop yarn. Comes in a 6.4 ounce skein, which has 18 yards. So this makes, I use one whole skein to make this sample scarf. This sample scarf is 72 inches long. So keep that in mind when you're purchasing your loop yarn, that if you buy one with a smaller skein than 18 yards, you may need more than one skein of the loop yarn. If you'd like to see a written photo tutorial of this project, be sure to click the link in the iCard or in the description of the video below to go to our website, needlepointers.com, where we will have a full tutorial. We will also have links near the end of the article of where you can buy some of this looped yarn. And remember, if you buy through our links, we get a small commission. It doesn't cost anything extra for you, but we do get a small commission, and it helps us to make more projects like this. For this scarf, we're using 10 loops across, and I'm going to be doing 3 stocking stitches and then a garter stitch, 3 stocking and a garter. So that's what gives it the bumpy look every few lines. You can change the pattern. So if you prefer to have, say, only 2 rows of stocking stitched, 1 garter, and 2 stocking and 1 garter, it will make these closer together and it will change the look somewhat. You could also do a little bit longer in between the garter stitch. The one thing you do have to make sure is that you can't just do all stocking stitch all the way up, because if you don't interlace a garter stitch every so often, what will happen is your whole project is going to curl in on itself. So you'll end up with a project with your scarf and it's going to be all curled up like this. So as you can see, this loop yarn has the loops pre-built or built into the yarn. So to make this project, we start with 10 loops. So I count 10 loops. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. So here's my 10th loop. To make the stocking stitch, you simply take the loop, the next loop in your working yarn. Your working yarn is what's attached to your skein. Take the next loop and put it through from the back to the front. The last loop. And then we're going to work our way across, taking the next loop in the working yarn and passing it through the loop in the previous yarn, going across. Now we're always going in for a stocking stitch. You always go from the back to the front. So my foundation row counts as my first row, and then this is row 2, and then I will continue with row 3 going back the other way. And we just, for loop yarn, you always keep the loop yarn facing the same direction towards you. You don't, as in, if you know how to do regular knitting, you turn over a lot of times. In loop yarn, you just keep everything facing towards you. You don't flip it. So the next row, I just continue with the stocking stitch for a 3rd row across, inserting each loop from back to front through the loop in the previous row. Try to make sure you don't skip any loops, either in you're working in your project or in the working yarn. If you do miss one along the way, you just take the loop yarn out like this, and you can then restitch. I suggest that you count your loops every few rows at least to make sure that you didn't drop or add any loops in here. So here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Because sometimes you can end up dropping a stitch. Okay, for the next row, this is our first garter stitch row because I have 3 rows of stocking stitch now. The garter stitch, just as easy as the stocking stitch, but instead of going from back to front, the garter stitch is going from front to back. Take each loop, the next one in your working yarn, and put it through the loop in the previous row for each row across. Oops, see, I missed this loop in my working yarn. So I need to take those few out and redo. So there's the next row. And I like to pull them up like this so that way they don't tuck underneath and get lost. That's how you end up dropping them if they get stuck underneath. 1, 2. Okay, so our pattern is 3 stocking, 1 garter. So next I'm going to start doing 3 more stocking stitch. So we just go back to sticking the loops through from back to front. Okay, so that's 1 row, 2 more rows of the stocking stitch, and I'll be back after I'm finished those 2 rows. Alright, so now I have 3 more rows, 1, 2, 3 of the stocking stitch, and like before, we do the garter stitch by going from front to back through for 1 row. So that's the next row. So basically that's it. You just continue with the same pattern, 3 more stocking, then a garter, 3 stocking and a garter, all the way until you run out of the yarn or until you get to the length that you want your scarf to be. This is a good time for me to check the back and to make sure I didn't drop any loops in the back, which I didn't. We just continue that along all the way until you get to the end. So the only other thing you need to know is how to finish off your scarf at the end once you either run out of yarn or you get to the length that you want. And you can see I used almost all the yarn up and there's only a few loops left here. I did only get 1 or 2 stocking here, so I might have wanted to stop when I got to where I was going to put these garters here. But I wanted to see how long the longest scarf I could make was from this. So once you're ready to finish off your scarf, and you're going to do what is called the bind off. And to bind off and finish this end, you take the loop, you take the first loop and then the second loop. The second loop goes through the first loop and you pull. And then you take the next loop through the second loop and you pull. Take the next loop, put it through, and all the way across until you get to the end. Okay, so now I just have this loop and I have my loops, the extra loops here. The step left is to tie this off. So I cut one of the loops. I can cut the rest of these loops off, and then I can make a knot around this loop with the extra yarn to tie it off. And then you can weave this extra tail in between the loops. And it's finished off. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this loop yarn scarf. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and pin our projects to Pinterest.